Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moments. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Throne of Steel episode number 156 based on novel. So let's start. Everyone from Bright Glimmer of Hope had already experienced Chen Hongyu's powerful domain in their battle. But because Chen Yinga was here as the Saint Spiritual Girl, Chen Hongyu's ability as Spirit Master was greatly restricted. But right now, they were facing a skeleton warrior wielding an Earth Elemental domain. In other words, an even more powerful opponent than the previous combination of the Ice and Fire Elemental Holy Guards. What everyone got to experience was the ultra-gravity and swamp technique attached to this Earth Elemental domain. Even if this warrior wouldn't attack, the persistent effect of this swamp would perhaps be enough to annihilate them. But moreover, how could this warrior just stand still? After activating his domain, the Earth Warrior strode forward, his body lustering resplendently, shooting out innumerable lights and making appear an armor made of a diamond-looking material on its torso. Earth is widely known for its superior defense, and there stood no doubt that this Earth Warrior held high prowess in this regard. Sweeping its huge hammer, it swung it at Kia. Kia suddenly let out a shriek, her ear-piercing voice lanced through the warrior's soul like a sharp needle. Monstrous brain-filling sounds. In the meantime, her body suddenly had an illusory look. From the effects of brain-filling monstrous sounds, the Earth Warrior's hammer-wielding slowed down greatly. Kia took advantage of this short delay to lightly tap that huge hammer with her sickle of the God of Death, seizing the opportunity to draw back. However, this Earth Warrior's strength was actually a frightening thing. Kia felt 3 consecutive impacts on her and let out a stuffy groan. But in the end, she managed to draw back to a distance a dozen steps from her comrades. Co-joined spiritual pills. Kia shouted loudly, and in the meantime, pointed the sickle of the God of Death at the deathly shadow. An overflowing murderous spirit burst out at once from her body. To some extent, an opponent of Earth Element was the hardest type to deal with, the difficulty lying in the Earth Warrior's defensive power and powerful force, and most of all, on this domain's existence. Even if Chen Yinga still had enough fighting strength to keep going, relying on Elemental Cage to bind the Earth Warrior may not necessarily give enough time for their attacks to finish it off in the short binding duration. But, right at this time, a tall silhouette suddenly sprang out in front of Kia, shouting determinedly, "Vice Captain, let me do it." The one that popped up in front of Kia was Simus Yan. While shouting to take co-joined spiritual boosting pills, Kia had already taken one. And this time, the Earth Warrior was already coming up. Avoiding the attack by a hair's breadth, she immediately let go of the sickle of the God of Death and pressed both her hands on Simus Yan's back. In the meantime, at Kia's back, Wang Yuanyuan, and Yu, Zhong Fangfang, Lin Xin and Duan Yi all entered the connection the next instant. Duan Yi's pill was directly inserted from Lin Xin to his mouth. The 7 of them immediately formed an heptagon, with Simus Yan standing as the vanguard. The gigantic ball of light was lifted high above his head, making a large bang as it forcibly stopped the downward swing of the warrior's 2 axes. Intense rumbles followed as the 7 who consumed the co-joined spiritual pills had their bodies shake violently. In the front, Simus Yan's body was flashing in fiery red and gold radiance, the defense boosting of the Scarlet Dragon armor, and the soul-sharing chain's effects. Even if that was done the instant of the co-joined spiritual pills' effects completion, receiving this blow still caused some damage. However, the energetic ball of light truly deserved being called a weapon of epic tier. Crush, smash, and triple blast's power erupted instantly against the dual hammers, forcing the warrior back 2 steps. "Your father is going to make it an all-out fight against you." Simus Yan had his round eyes wide open, his whole body's muscles swelling violently. An incomparably intrepid bearing was felt from him. "Sima, you can't!" Lin Xin shouted in haste behind him. But as if Simus Yan didn't hear anything, he directly unleashed his berserk ability. There's no way he would have forgotten Lin Xin's numerous warning that the berserk ability couldn't be used under the effects of the co-joined spiritual pills, because in case he enters berserk state, his external spiritual energy will immediately erupt, greatly amplifying his body's capacity. But if a too large amount of internal spiritual energy is poured in the body, upon termination his body would very possibly not be able to bear the burden and would crumble. However, the current Simus Yan seemed as if he had totally forgotten all this. Instantly entering berserk mode, his body seemed to swell as his muscles tore through his gown. His right fist shot out, beating on the gigantic ball of light to make it bounce back, and in the meantime his right feet stamped on the ground. A surge of purple electric flow rushed out from his body, spreading to the surrounding like lightning flashes. Each of the 7 reached over 15,000 spiritual energy, and all of them had taken co-joined spiritual boosting pills. Adding to that Simus Yan's self-use of Berserk mode and the spiritual co-joint boosting pills. Now, although the current Simus Yan's spiritual energy was still below the Earth Warrior, it was not much below. The Earth Warrior swung its two hammers, abruptly knocking the air and shooting a yellow ray of light out upon collision, shooting straight to Simus Yan's chest. His greatest defect after making use of the co-joined spiritual pills was a lack of agility, so Simus Yan did not think at all about dodging. With a loud roar, his hands gripped onto the handle of the energetic ball of light, abruptly meeting with the enemy. In another loud collision, yellow light was dispersed all around, but this time none of the light from the life-sharing effects of the chains manifested. The previous happening of his right foot stamping the ground was not wasted at all. Making use of the shock it caused to avoid the attack, he made use of the enhanced power of the spiritual stove of godly purple thunder to temporarily neutralize the earth elemental domain under their feet. Feel free to try out my great self. The energetic ball of light was lifted from his chest as Simus Yan shouted out in fury, causing the power of the spiritual stove to break out in all directions. An incandescent purple-colored ball of light took shape, flying straight to the Earth Warrior. Positioned behind him, Lin Xin unconsciously shut his both eyes, which were already muddled. As the creator of the co-joined spiritual pills, no one else understood their effects better than him. Simus Yan was under the effects of co-joined spiritual pills, and was using Berserk mode together with his purple godly thunder spiritual stove, with over 10,000 spiritual energy. The burden on his body could only be described as terrifying. When this battle ends, the backlash on his body would only be of the same level. Even Lin Xin didn't know whether he would be able to bear it all. And, for now, he could only pray for that Scarlet Dragon armor to be strong enough to protect his body. The strengthened purple godly thunder cannon burst out instantly in front of the warrior, who met the attack with crossed hammers. An intense explosion burst out the next instant. As expected, thunder was not very effective against Earth, but that's only if you speak of elemental affinity. Simus Yan's purple godly thunder spiritual stove also had a terrifying explosive force outside its thunder elemental power. When facing the panther demon god Orgzer, even an ordinary use of the purple godly thunder spiritual stove was able to repel him. This Earth Warrior, though, was certainly even stronger than Orgzer, in addition to having the support of a domain. But Simus Yan's enhanced purple godly thunder cannon was more than twice as strong. Bang! A terrifying explosion nearly took all Bright Glimmer of Hope's members' hearing at once, as the Earth Warrior fell back after being pushed back a distance of 4 walking steps. The pair of hammers in its arms were already cracked, and its entire body was surrounded in purple light. The process of its backstep looked like the sight of a falling drunk man. Although the powerful explosion force did not manage to make that Earth Elemental's body numb, this purple godly thunder cannon's might did cause the Earth Warrior's soul fire to get numb. Simus Yan once again roared, rotating the energetic ball of light thrice above his head before throwing it fiercely. The comrades behind him didn't see it, but right now Simus Yan's both eyes were already colored blood red. And a similar blood-red ray was spreading from the chain to inside the ball. Sacrifice, the Night ability. This is an ability Long Houchen had used not only once. Originally, priests should not be able to use such an ability, but Simus Yan was not an ordinary priest, but a disciplined priest. And this sacrifice ability was something he had pleaded Long Houchen to teach him. In the current situation, Simus Yan did not give the slightest thought about the aftermath for this battle on his body. Only memories of Long Houchen's death in the Demon God Emperor's hands kept surfacing in his mind. He was Long Houchen's retainer knight, yet wasn't able to help him in the slightest back at that time. Simus Yan was quite a bit older than Long Houchen, but ever since this demon hunt squad got formed, he had been following him wholeheartedly. In his heart, Houchen was not only his captain, but also an elder brother. Being the soul and cornerstone of his team, Long Houchen had acted several times as the burning soul of that team. Simus Yan only had a single thought now, and that was to pave the way for resurrecting their captain without sparing any cost. Since a girl such as Chen Ying dared do that, how could he shrink before making sacrifices? Even under the effects of the co-joined spiritual boosting pills, Simus Yan understood that he didn't have much prospects in winning. But he still stood there, bearing the responsibility of becoming the focal point of the spiritual gathering pills. The thoughts he had were, if this lasts, I can only end in defeat. With the domain boosting him, that Earth Warrior is not someone I can win against. So his strategy was to launch an attack of unprecedented intensity to get the Earth Warrior in an instant kill. After revolving thrice, the gigantic ball of light had turned into an amethyst color. The terrifying electricity emanating from it had a translucent feel and carried a truly ruthless reek of blood. The instant a 1-meter diameter energetic ball of light came flying, Simus Yan spurted out a large mouthful of blood. In a resonant splurt of blood, his scarlet dragon armor then smashed to pieces suddenly. With a loud bang, his upper body covered in scars came to sight. The retreating Earth Warrior was bombarded by Simus Yan's full-powered and willed energetic ball of light. The pair of hammers shattered, and immediately, the ball left a mark on its chest. 12 repeated booms resounded the same as alternated shots from magic cannons. In the midst of these 12 blasts, the Earth Warrior's body shook violently. Without a single burst of sound, the gap on its body spread out even more massively as the cracks multiplied. At the time of the last echo, the Earth Warrior's body was already blasted to shreds. It wasn't even able to pay a single word of allegiance to its master, turning into a yellow light shooting at the eternal melody on Kia's chest. Sima! The instant that Earth Warrior collapsed, Simus Yan crumbled as well, falling to the ground with a large shock underneath Kia. His upper body was full of bloody wounds, having turned into a man of blood the instant of Berserk mode's ending. 2 glints of light landed on Simus Yan's body almost at the same time, coming from Duan Yi and Zhong Fangfang's holy protections. The instant after the 2 released this instantaneous spell, they immediately started chanting healing magic of higher scale. Han Yu came to Simus Yan's side, releasing his spiritual stove of light blessings to help everyone recover their spiritual energy. Lin Xin stepped forward, holding Simus Yan's fallen body and placing pills into his mouth before inspecting his wounds. Leaning on Lin Xin's chest, Simus Yan's chest moved up fiercely as blood flew continuously from his mouth, nose, and ears. But despite it being full of blood, he had a smile on his face. I succeeded. Vice Captain. Leaving the rest to you. Possible. Domain. Win Powerhouse. Take care. Just before. This opponent. Power. Wielded with nature element. We. Must. Resurrect. Boss. As if these were his last words, Simus Yan spoke these words as his body was shaking all over. By chance, Zhong Fangfang and Duan Yi's high-level magics were completed successively right after that, healing his bruised body. The bruises on the surface healed easily, but the internal wounds were not that easy to heal. Kia was kneeling in front of Simus Yan, strongly pursing her lips together to stop her tears from flowing down. She was now the whole team's leader, and as such, she had to stay strong. Thank you, Sima. Simus Yan's whole body was shaking, gradually entering a state of serenity from the healing magic, but in the meantime his vital force became fainter and fainter. Wang Yuanyuan grabbed Lin Xin's shoulder, asking hastily, "How are things?" Lin Xin grinded his teeth tightly, and did not give a reply to Wang Yuanyuan's question, taking out other pills to pour into Simus Yan's mouth. Right now, Simus Yan was already unconscious, and couldn't swallow it on his own. Lin Xin went so far as to push his mouth against Simus to help him swallow the pills. Under the effects of Han Yu's spiritual stove of light blessing, and Duan Yi and Zhong Fangfang's nearly simultaneous usage of healing spells, it still took a whole half an hour for Lin Xin's face to finally become a bit more relaxed. How are things? Wang Yuanyuan asked hastily. Simus Yan breathed in a large gasp as he replied, "Our Baldai is tenacious and finally managed to make it through alive." The backlashes from his spiritual stove, Berserk state and use of the ability sacrifice was majorly sustained by his Scarlet Dragon armor of epic tier. Otherwise, how could a piece of equipment of epic tier break down like that? But even so, that nearly cost him his life. His internal organs had started to crumble and decay. But my pills and the brothers' healing kept them alive by a thread. At least now his life is stabilized and is not at risk anymore. Shit, what a loss. Why did I have to make contact with this guy's thick lips? An incomparable loss. The tense atmosphere finally relaxed after Lin Xin said these few words. Aside from Kia, the whole group exuded smiles. In normal times, they would perhaps be laughing in joy, but right now, they were only filled with heavy feelings. This was only the test of the first half of the 5th floor, and they had already lost Chen Yinga and Simus Yan. Since the following tests would only get harder, would they really make it to the final 7th floor? Although Simus Yan had vanquished the Earth Warrior by himself, that was after using the co-joined spiritual boosting pills, therefore making everyone fall into a weakened state. Although it was continuously improved by Lin Xin, who made the backlashes far weaker than before after adding a lot of ingredients, they were in the midst of continuous battles, making even light blessings insufficient to return them to their optimum state. Although Kia was worried, she could obviously not keep advancing immediately. By continuing, they would face off against even more powerful opponents wielding domains, against whom they could only have a chance by using the co-joined spiritual pills given the current state of the team. Everyone have a rest here. After our weakened state is over, we will keep advancing. Reaching this point, Kia cautiously untied Long Houchen from her back, placing him on the ground. Seeing his pale, bloodless face, Kia's body couldn't help but shake. Raising her hand and gently stroking his face, tears fell down beyond her control. "Idiot, you idiot. I will bring you back to life no matter the cost." This time of rest was much longer than the previous one. Under Lin Xin, Zhong Fangfang, and Yu and Duan Yi's joint efforts, Simus Yan's body was finally stabilized, at least guaranteeing his certain survival. It was at this kind of time that the effects from the forest boa training pills became visible. Compared to other powerhouses of the same vocation at the same level, their powerful external spiritual energy made their resistance towards the side effects of the co-joined spiritual pills much better than ordinary powerhouses. This was something Duan Yi got to see very clearly. After roughly 8 hours, Kia's group was already done recovering for the most part, apart from Duan Yi's weakened state which still persisted. Under these conditions, he wouldn't be able to take another co-joined spiritual pill, so even if he begged repeatedly, Kia decided to instead have him stay and take care of Simus Yan. "Everyone, have co-joined spiritual pills prepared?" Kia asked sternly. "Lin Xin, do you have some more spares of co-joined spiritual pills?" Lin Xin nodded. "I have another set on me. Adding it to the set in everyone's hand, we can still go for 2 more battles." Kia wrinkled her eyebrows, nodding slowly. After less than a day, they had successively taken the 3rd and 4th floor trials, and half of the 5ths. But this Tower of Eternity had 7 floors in total. Since the 5th floor already had powerful holy guards wielding domains, how about the incoming 6th and 7th floors? Right now, everyone had a very grim facial expression. Although they were unwilling to think of it, they faintly realized that the final climb of the 7th floor would perhaps be extremely difficult. But none of them was willing to speak out these facts, much less believe in them. No matter what, they would strive their greatest effort to fight for time and fight for the opportunity of resurrecting Long Houchen. This Tower of Eternity was their only hope out there. Kia took a deep breath. "Another trial is waiting for us right after this. Up next, we should have to face a wind elemental mage in control of a wind domain. Wind mag's greatest strength is in their speed. We have no way to know about the opponent's domain in advance, but I will be in charge of the offense while everyone else boosts me through the co-joined spiritual pills. We must defeat the opponent in the shortest time, and not let him deploy his greatest attacks." While speaking up to there, she had already placed Long Houchen back on her back, binding him tightly with the chains. "Kia!" Wang Yuanyuan suddenly called out her name. "Yeah?" Kia looked at her puzzlingly. Wang Yuanyuan determinedly stared at her face. "Let me be the one undertaking this duty." "No way." Kia rejected her suggestion without giving it the slightest thought. Just before, Simus Yan had to try hard with his life at stake, narrowly dying in battle. How could she, as the temporary captain, let her comrades take such risks? Moreover, the strongest of the team was her. Wang Yuanyuan grabbed Kia's shoulders, facing her face on. "Kia, listen to me. We are a team, and resurrecting captain is by no means a business all your own. Yinga and Sima already gave their greatest shot, so the next one to go should be me. I am confident in succeeding, as the space attribute is a counter to wind element. Moreover, just like everyone else, I have secret moves of my own. I am very confident." Kia still shook her head. "Yuanyuan, I know that you have good intentions, but I have greater chances than you." Wang Yuanyuan suddenly gave an emotional response. "I know that you have greater chances than me, but are you confident in being able to stay unharmed while defeating the enemy?" "No, you cannot. With your current cultivation, you must utilize the 7 arts of the God of Death to vanquish a mage wielding a domain, but you have already used it once in the past 12 hours. Using it once again will undoubtedly cause a terrible backlash. Don't forget that this is not the last trial we are going to face. We still have the 6th and 7th floors coming up after that. You may be the strongest of us, but this is all the more of a reason for you to preserve your strength for what's coming next. Against the even stronger opponents, we can only rely on you. Can you afford to be weakened by the backlash at that time? I am not acting out of blind impulse, and am certainly confident since I dare demand to take your stead. Let me go. Boss did so much for us, the least I wish to do is to be able to do the most I can to bring him back to life. If we end up in failure, I will otherwise be filled with regrets for my whole lifetime." Kia's eyes reddened unawarely. Yuanyuan. At some point, Zhong Fangfang had joined Wang Yuanyuan's side. Kia, how about letting her go? I believe that Yuanyuan is capable of it. For the sake of advancing, we must make some concession, and your strength will be needed at the most challenging hurdles. Wang Yuanyuan showed a faint smile, spreading out her arms to give Kia a tight hug, before turning back and taking the lead to head deeper into the 5th floor of the Tower of Eternity. Zhong Fangfang followed after with Kia, Lin Xin, and Han Yu right behind. At this point, only 5 members of the team were left, all of whom had a co-joined spiritual boosting pill in their hand. Without a doubt, all the trials starting from this 5th floor were all prepared for powerhouses of the 9th step. Having come here without having even reached the 8th step of cultivation, they already had no effort to spare. Continuing on, every step ahead would inevitably have a massive cost. And even if they fail, they will have to keep going forward, so that Long Haochen may have a chance to be resurrected, even at the cost of their lives. As bright light waves were released lightly, the surrounding air suddenly intensified after they walked 50 meters forward. The wind freely fluctuated in the hall, moving up and down, and dim green radiance flashed in all directions. Wang Yuanyuan put the co-joined spiritual boosting pill in her mouth without hesitation, and so did the others. The 5 of them became one in a split second, forming a whole new formation. However, after taking the pill, Wang Yuanyuan still didn't take out her terrifying weapon Bloodstorm, only focusing on her huge gigantic divine soul shield. Her footsteps were very steady, letting the spiritual energy obtained from her comrades integrate with her own. The surface of her skin was starting to disperse some silver light, and both her eyes appeared particularly bright. A thick bloody aura came out from this powerful and determined female warrior, causing the nearby air to fluctuate violently. The air surrounding Wang Yuanyuan turned illusory due to all the spatial essence. The reason why they had taken the co-joined spiritual boosting pills earlier was that the enemy was very possibly of the fastest kind of wind mage. As expected, the interior of the Tower of Eternity abided by its own rules. As a green pillar of light appeared afar off, a thin green skeleton appeared in the group's line of sight. In a thin brush of green light, the sky suddenly dispersed soft fluctuations of spiritual energy, just as if signaling the arrival of spring. A spring wind came brushing away, but in the midst of this feeling, waves of green wind blades condensed in the latter part of the 5th floor of the Tower of Eternity. In an instant, myriads of wind blades were gradually taking shape. Was this a domain or a spell? For a moment, everyone in the group shared these same thoughts. Only Wang Yuanyuan standing in the vanguard looked like she did not even put these wind blades in her eye, focusing her sight on her own gigantic divine soul shield. For silver crystals were on the gigantic shide, dispersing intense spatial attribute waves. While looking with determination, she swiftly took out another silver crystal, embedding it in the shield's 5th hole. The instant this crystal was inserted inside the shield, an intense silver light abruptly rose from that shield, carrying the spatial spiritual energy released from Wang Yuanyuan's body to produce fierce flame-like fluctuations. A silver-colored fog rapidly ascended over her body. Wang Yuanyuan's whole body, which used to be enveloped in silver light, gradually twisted as she stood. The divine soul shield was still silver-colored, but the 5 silver crystals inlaid inside were all showing an orange-colored luster. In other words, this divine soul shield had started the process of entering the epic tier. Wang Yuanyuan didn't stop at that, and swiftly inlaid the 6th gem in turn. Bang! A terrible silver flash resounded, like an ignited can of gunpowder in its instant of explosion. And just at this time, that wind element mage's first attack also reached out. Multitudinous wind blades carried ear-piercing sounds, shot from all directions toward the 5 from bright glimmer of hope. Each wind blade had a metallic gloss, just like a physical weapon, with the attached spiritual energy seemingly able to cut everything down. But these attacks met the silver radiance extending like a volcano. Dense and deep silver spatial spiritual energy turned into a silver dragon in a split second, enveloping Wang Yuanyuan's group of 5, and coiling rapidly. All the green blade projections melted instantly upon contact with the silver dragon, which let out some ripples all around. The distant green skeleton showed a slight shock. This powerful holy god blessed with the soul of powerhouse could not recall having ever met such an opponent. But the previous attack was just a start. Lifting the green spear, he shouted lightly, "Swift wind." These mere words turned the whole space into green. Sparkling in green, the whole latter part of the 5th floor of the Tower of Eternity turned into a gigantic whirlpool without any chinks, and revolving at an astonishing speed. That was his domain, a wind elemental domain with great offensive capabilities. Perhaps the burst power of a wind mage did not reach that of a fire mage, but their speed and the duration of their offenses were in no way below. Upon release of the domain, the silver flames surrounding Wang Yuanyuan's body started shaking violently. One could clearly see them turn into layers upon layer of silver light, looking close to collapse. Right now, the four people behind Wang Yuanyuan all had whole new looks. Although they had guessed that the next opponent would be extremely powerful, this wind mage's strength really surpassed all their expectations. This second domain wielder clearly surpassed the previous Earth warrior by far in offensive power and domain wielding ability. Furthermore, whereas the Earth warrior's domain was only supportive, this wind mage's domain was able to launch powerful directed attacks. At its 9th step cultivation, this domain would be able to reach the forbidden spell level of power if given just a bit of time. How could Wang Yuanyuan resist in front of such a powerful attack? The cause is the co-joined spiritual boosting pills, making her skills temporarily able to withstand the enemy. But under the pills' effects, she was unable to make use of her spiritual stove of spatial gates. No one was able to think of a way she could subdue the enemy under such circumstances. Furthermore, there was nothing the others could make out from her expression. How was Wang Yuanyuan feeling right now? Her eyes were full of determination, not looking at the distant enemy, but at the divine soul shield in her hand. Her most powerful silver coiling dragon was rapidly dispersed, as she held her last spatial crystal in her hand, slowly placing it onto the last cavity of the divine soul shield. This instant, her eyes were filled to the brim with determination. She could also do what Simus Yan did, that was her only current thought. Maybe in her comrade's eyes, her epic tier upgraded Bloodstorm was her most powerful weapon, but only she knew that actually, the most powerful asset she had was still her divine soul shield. However, its requirements in spiritual energy being so high, and the strain on her being far greater than Bloodstorm, she did not really make use of the most powerful abilities attached to the divine soul shield. With her current cultivation, she could at most sustain for a short battle the use of 5 embedded gems, and the 6th spatial gem was already her limit after co-joined spiritual boost. The divine soul shield had in total 7 cavities, but the 7th and the previous 6 were entirely different. After the 6th cavity is gemmed, the divine soul shield was just a weapon. But this 7th made it a. Her left foot stepped forward, and Wang Yuanyuan abruptly stuck out her chest, releasing an intense spatial elemental spiritual energy and causing the collapsing silver dragon to gain a great deal of substance. Immediately throwing her stubborn gaze to the distant enemy, she looked at that wind mage. Bang! An intense silver light was shot out, like myriads of silver arrows abruptly bursting out from Wang Yuanyuan's body. The terrible silver halations surrounding her instantly reached their climax, especially all around her chest. Spirit Blast. Wang Yuanyuan utilized this powerful warrior amplifying ability. In some sense, Spirit Blast was a fuse for internal spiritual energy, instantly causing its ignition and enabling it to exert an even great fighting strength in a short duration, quite similar to the effects of the Night Sacrifice ability. In the meantime, Wang Yuanyuan slowly lifted the divine soul shield, reciting in a bloodthirsty voice, "Almighty shield, please grant me you the true power of the divine soul blood." In the meantime, Wang Yuanyuan retrieved her left hand, knocking her fist onto her chest. Immediately, she spat a mouthful of blood, splashing all over the divine soul shield, and the spatial crystal in her left hand swiftly made it into the last cavity of the divine soul shield. The instant the spatial crystal made it into the last cavity, 3 successive loud sounds reverberated. In the midst of those violent rumbles, the spatial spiritual energy dispersed by Wang Yuanyuan grew threefold, or rather, blasted 3 times at once. To the audience's shock, all they could see during the process of these 3 blasts was an expanse of silver, but at the end of the blasts, in a stupor, they witnessed the sight of the originally incomparably domineering wind elemental domain crumbling at once. What level of strength could do that? Never had they expected Wang Yuanyuan to actually have such a power. At some unknown point, a gigantic figure had appeared in front of Wang Yuanyuan, over 10 meters tall and fully equipped in silver armor. But from the outside, that armor was not shining in silver, but in reeking blood red. This 10 meters tall gigantic warrior held in its left hand a shield, an enlarged version of the divine soul shield, just as tall as that giant. With a large bang, the warrior abruptly strode forward. The whole Tower of Eternity shook violently at each step he took. Right now, Wang Yuanyuan's eyes were colored silver, and the divine soul shield previously in her hand wasn't there anymore. One could distinctly see thin bloody beads flow outside her skin, as her whole body trembled severely. God's descent. This was clearly a God's descent. But unlike Kia and Long Haochen, who had previously made displays of God's descent, Wang Yuanyuan was not a God's chosen one. She was borrowing the power of her weapon to activate God's descent. With her gigantic soul god blood vessels as a catalyst and the divine soul shield as an intermediary, she unexpectedly managed this inconceivable summon. The instant that terrible gigantic soul god strode forward, the 10 meters long shield in his hand already splashed across. The next instant, the whole space became filled only with silver color. A strident lacerating sound could be heard everywhere that shield passed. A god's power. That was the power of a true god. Kia even concluded that at least none of her previous displays of God's descent could compare with this gigantic soul god, and the same went even for Long Haochen. But what could be the cost to pay for such a terrible attack? Kia, Linxin, and Yu, Zhong Fangfang felt extremely tense right this instant. The Wind Mage was also full of shock due to this so sudden shocking scene. His hand moved rhythmically, and complex symbols appeared in front of him, as the shattered domain reconstituted anew. In a flash, 9 whirlpools had gathered in front of him. These 9 whirlpools were completely different from the previous display of the domain. Although they were much smaller in volume, they gave off far greater feelings of threat. Each little whirlpool dispersed a greenish-gold glow, flying at very slow speed, but heading towards the certain path of the Divine Soul Shield. After releasing those 9 little whirlpools, the soul fire pulsing in the eyes of that green skeleton weakened greatly. It was clearly not a magic to take lightly. The first whirlpool shattered the instant of contact, spattering green light to all directions. Immediately, the second, third, fourth, and fifth followed, none of which missed, to block the Divine Soul Shield's path. But at the time of the 6th little whirlpool collision, the Divine Soul Shield made a short pause, as if signaling that its power was starting to get exhausted. "Kill!" Wang Yuanyuan roared to the sky, once again spraying out blood in her enraged shout. Immediately, a large bloody shadow rushed out from her body, dissolving into the gigantic soul god ahead, and the splattered gigantic soul god immediately regained its vigor. The 7th spatial crystal on Divine Soul Shield lit up resplendently, and immediately, a massive silver pillar shot up loudly. This was a silver pillar of light extending over 10 meters. The remaining 3 green whirlpool were instantly swallowed inside alongside that green skeleton. A loud explosion shook the whole Tower of Eternity, causing light undulations of Breath of Death to faintly disperse at each shaking. After this blow terminated, the whole spiritual energy sharing effects produced by the co-joined spiritual pills came to a stop. Wang Yuanyuan remained kneeled on the ground, entirely covered in blood, just like Simus Yan was just before. But unlike him, though the blood on her was leaking outside her body, there was no scar left on her. The 10 meters tall gigantic soul god crumbled, and after the shield spiraled several continuous times, it pierced the ground in front of her. Dang! In ear-piercing shatters, the 7 spatial crystals on the Divine Soul Shield shattered at the same time, and the shield lost all its color, turning a pitch black. Wang Yuanyuan still had a knee on the ground, motionless, as the silver light in her eyes gradually dissipated. Still, her look was directed ahead of her from beginning to end, gazing up where that immense silver pillar of light gradually disappeared. Finally, all the silver light had vanished, and that green skeleton was still standing there, shrouded all around by a solid-looking green barrier, and in a standstill. It did not kill him? Kia's group of 4 looked at that green skeleton in disbelief. But the next instant, _clang sounds reverberated, as the green light surrounding that green skeleton splattered like a falling egg, splitting open from head to toes. "Third Holy Guard acknowledges allegiance to you." In a flash of green light, a sort of green arrow shot toward Kia, making way inside the eternal melody. Kia couldn't attend to feeling the heat from the eternal melody submerging her, and strode forward toward Wang Yuanyuan at once. What she saw was a deep murderous spirit and conviction gradually watering down. A look of relief and gratification gradually appeared, but her eyes had cleared, then become ashen white. This instant, a blood-colored radiance shot to her side, containing a fist-sized rune flashing out from beside Kia to make its way inside Wang Yuanyuan's forehead. Wang Yuanyuan's body shook violently, and her originally ashen-white pupils regained some color. Letting out a stuffy groan, she fell to the ground. Kia hastily caught her body, while on the other side Zhong Fangfang also collapsed. Wang Yuanyuan was already unconscious, but Zhong Fangfang, still conscious, displayed a smile of satisfaction. "This time, Yuanyuan is to be left to me without any possible other option. Now I can be satisfied. You all have to succeed." After saying this, Zhong Fangfang's eyes shut, going unconscious. After he went unconscious too, a strange scene took place. From Wang Yuanyuan and Zhong Fangfang dispersed faint blood-colored rays, and on their foreheads started to glint similar blood-colored runes. These 2 runes were completely different, but on their edge one could see that if they were joined, it would make a single complete rune. But just what could they stand for? Han Yu supported Zhong Fangfang's body with his hand, slowly placing it beside Wang Yuanyuan. Kneeling on one knee, his fist on the chest, he resonantly performed a knight salute of the most solemn kind. This was an etiquette of great homage. Han Yu, hurry up and get on with healing magic. Why aren't you treating them? Beside them, Lin Xin already couldn't hold his thoughts. Han Yu shook his head calmly. There's no use, healing magic won't have any effect on them. Brother Zhong is the most respect-worthy young knight I have ever encountered outside boss. Cair asked in a rush, will there be anything happening to them? Han Yu shook his head and replied, their lives are not endangered, it's just that. Lin Xin was hasty, don't cut off what you're saying in the middle, can you? Just what is going on with them? Han Yu took a deep breath, also feeling emotional. If I am not mistaken, the power Yuanyuan just utilized was totally past her limits. Using her own blood vessels to call a god's descent through the divine soul shield and launching 2 attacks depleted nearly all her vital forces. She had to ignite her own life, to raise her blood vessels to their limit of tolerance. Only like that could she achieve that summon. But as a result, Yuanyuan's life is coming to its limit after the battle's termination. Didn't you say their lives were not endangered? Kia questioned hastily. This is where Brother Zhong really is worthy of respect. Although this is not a magic spell I am capable of using, it can be seen from the symbols that what he used should be a secret life-saving technique passed from old times, to transmit one's life to another, passing the caster's vital force to a target on the verge of death to extend the target's life. From Brother Zhong's look and the gloss on this rune, he should have passed half his life straight to Yuanyuan, which is to say that if he originally should have had 100 years left to live, now Yuanyuan and him will only be able to share 50 for each of them. Hearing Han Yu so far, Kia and Lin Xin both couldn't help but gasp. No matter how ice-cold Kia's dispositions were, she couldn't help but involuntarily cry out bitterly at this instant. Yuanyuan, why did you do that? If Haochen was let known that you guys had to pay such a cost for his sake, I'm afraid he would not even be willing to let himself be resurrected. Shaking greatly, Kia understood that, to come so far, there had already been 3 of her comrades that had to go to the brink of death, while Zhong Fangfang had to give half his life expectancy away. For the sake of resurrecting Long Haochen, they had paid far too much. Not sure which chapter this was introduced, but you might want to check it. Never I think okay, I thought there was something about her revealing her special body characteristic to the group, but maybe not. 161 has her gigantic divine soul shield, the might of this blood-bound equipment that is already close to the legendary tier. That and her constant abnormal bloodlust must have gotten me confused with something else. This video will end here.